Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Rom, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, follow me on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. Have you taken advantage of the Visionary Woman's free guide to Rise and Thrive? Recently, I released this updated version of my free gift on my website, meredithrom.com. This guide will help you learn how to get clear on your vision, overcome your fears, tap into intuitive guidance, harness focus for productivity, all while staying true to your feminine essence. To learn more and to sign up for the free download, simply sign up on my website, meredithrom.com. I'm here today with Kelly Smith, who is the founder of Yoga for You Yoga Method and School. She's also a master trainer. She has a podcast with guided meditations, and she started her first business when she was 23 years old. She works with empowering women and helping people become the best versions of themselves through yoga. She believes the mind is the most powerful thing you possess, and there is nothing in this world holding you back except for you. After a lifetime of telling herself lies and believing that she wasn't good enough, smart enough, talented enough, special enough, thin enough, or just plain enough, she took a long, hard look in the mirror and in her heart and decided it was time she connected with who she truly was. She got out of her own way and started to finally live. Through yoga and meditation, she got a glimpse of who she really was, and it changed everything. She's dedicated her life to teaching soul searchers how to master their minds and connect with their true selves so they can live an abundant and authentic life. Thank you for being here, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always love to hear just how, especially with yoga, I also have a personal story with yoga and it really being this gateway into this whole world of spirituality and growth. And I wonder what your relationship to that is. How did you come to find it? What is your story in relationship to becoming a teacher and starting your business?
So I started yoga for the same reason a lot of people start yoga, and that is just for the physical benefits. So I would go to class. I started doing yoga when I was in middle school. My mom actually had to take me to my first yoga class and drop me off and pick me up. And I went because I was an athlete. So I was an athlete for pretty much my whole life and through college. And I started with yoga as a way to kind of cross-train for my sports. So I was very tuned into the physical. I wanted to be more flexible. I wanted to be stronger. I wanted to be more mobile. And I started there, and then I stayed for the rest. So pretty quickly after being so focused on the physical, and I used to be, I'm very ashamed to admit this, I used to be a Shavasana skipper, and which, yes, any of you yoga teachers out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That person that doesn't think they have time for those last few minutes. So they roll up their mat and they give the teacher a little wave and dart out the door before Shavasana. That used to be me. I'm very embarrassed to admit it, but it's true. And so I used to just practice with the physical. And then when I was in high school, my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and I was her primary caregiver. And during that time, we were spending a lot of time together, and I started to research the therapeutic benefits of yoga. So obviously at that time, after major surgeries and treatments and all sorts of horrible things, regular asana practice just wasn't an option for her. So I started to look into more breath and meditation and restorative yoga, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And it's something that my mom and I started to do together. And we just had this moment where we were both like, this is something that's really special. And maybe this is something you should do or something you should keep doing. But I was only 16. So I still checked all the boxes and did all the good adult things and went to college and got my piece of paper and got a real job. And right after my college graduation, I decided to take my first 200-hour training. So I always had loved yoga, and it was always something that I did, but I never really had anyone to do it with. Like I never really felt like I fit in. Because at the time yoga wasn't quite cool like it is now. So it wasn't like we had classes on our college campus or anything like that. So I would sneak off to the studio that was in town and take classes and connect with other yogis. And they happened to be offering a teacher training, and it started the week after I graduated college. So I decided to enroll in that. And I thought, maybe I'll never really teach. I just want to learn more. And I just continued to fall in love with it. And when I started to go and teach at my big girl or work at my real girl job, I also was teaching just on the side. So I was just subbing and, teaching a class here, teaching a class there. And I was always so scared to be in front of everyone and only, but I dreamt of like being able to teach and making this my career. And as fate would have it, my now husband, then boyfriend, was applying to medical school. And he got in a place that I lovingly refer to as a one bar, one Walmart town. And so he asked me to come with him. And the first time I saw this place, I cried. And I was like, oh, well, I live in Minneapolis and I have this career and I have friends here and I have all these things. And I don't know if I can take everything and move to a completely different state and do this. I was really afraid. And, but I finally got the message I need to go and I need to do this. So I went and I moved to this one bar, one Walmart town, and I couldn't bring my job with me. And I kind of had a little bit of a pity party for a few days. And I thought, what am I going to do? I knew we were going to be there for at least 2 years. It ended up being 3 years. And I said, am I going to make this the worst 2 years of my life? Or am I going to make this basically 2 of the most courageous years of my life? And so I decided that I was done being afraid and I was done doing things that didn't fulfill me. And I was going to try to just find my strength and start teaching yoga as my career. So I started with a few classes and then that became bigger. And then I took on private clients that became bigger and eventually ended up opening the first yoga studio ever in that town. And we were there for about 3 years. And then we moved again for my husband's job. So a different portion of medical school, because the whole process is like 50 years long. At least that's what it feels like. And so we moved again. So we were in Missouri. We moved to Michigan. And when we moved here, I sold my studio and I had done some yoga teacher trainings. So I had, the community was still there and thriving. And I decided that I wanted more freedom in my life. And so I had made yoga and meditation my career, but I didn't want to be tied down to a physical location like I was when I owned a studio. So I decided I wanted to create a completely location independent yoga and meditation school. So I do not have a physical location anymore. And I took Yoga for You, which used to be the brick and mortar studio. And I have now created something that is completely location independent. So I podcast, I offer all sorts of teacher trainings. So yoga teacher trainings, yoga nidra teacher training, meditation teacher training. And I do retreats and pop-up events and workshops. But I don't actually work out of any one physical location so that I can just have the freedom that I felt like my heart was really desiring.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm curious, that moment when you chose to move to Missouri,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
and you have that decision, like I can face my fears and I can be courageous and I can make this happen and work for me, or I can just wallow and be a victim.
Yeah.
And,
I considered the wallowing. I considered it.
So tell us about that courageous step and what helped you get out of your own way? What helped you from holding yourself back? And also just for anyone listening, like how can we do that?
So I think Before I can answer how I got out of what was holding me back, I have to talk about what was holding me back. And that was absolutely my fear. And so my fear that I wasn't going to be good enough. So my fear that I was going to try to live this dream and I was going to fail. And maybe, maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe we would not be able to pay our bills. I'd have to go get another job. I'd have to admit to everyone I tried something and it didn't work. But I also at that time, so I was quite young. I was about 22, just turned 23. And I was really afraid of what other people thought. So I had a lot of people in my immediate circle, when I told them what I wanted to do, they thought it was silly, or they thought it was a waste of my time or a waste of my college degree, or they thought I should go get an MBA or I should go, do something else. And that why would I just want to teach yoga? And it really bothered me that so many people thought what my heart wanted to do was silly. And so that made me second guess myself and think, well, maybe it is silly. Maybe I'm getting the wrong message. And the only person that really believed in me at that time was my mom. And she was the one that was like, no, if this is what you feel like you should be doing, like, don't question that. You should be doing it. And I think that in that moment, when I decided that I was going to kind of get out of my own way and be courageous and try something, was that I just had to let go of that idea of what if I fail? And I really just asked myself that question, what if I failed? And the answer I got was, so what? Like, what was going to happen? I would always regret not trying to do what I wanted to do. And I would always regret living a life where I felt like I was just very hollow and surface level. And like I wasn't living what I was supposed to be doing, and I didn't try. And so I just decided that I really wasn't going to be that worried about failing anymore. And that if I failed, that would be okay, that at least I tried and I gave it a shot. And to me, failure was so much better than regret.
That's so helpful. Yeah, to ask ourselves, what's the worst that could happen here? Mm-hmm. And often it is just the failure piece. And it's like, okay, well, would that be the end of the world? Would I be able to pick myself back up? Would I? And often the answer is, yeah, I'd rather like do this and fail than to not do it at all.
Yeah. And I mean, I have the luxury now of hindsight, and I realize now that at that time stakes were pretty low. I mean, we were young, we didn't have kids, all these things, the stakes were so low. And really, there wouldn't have been a better time in life for me to try to do something that was so different and that my heart was asking me to do than at that time. I mean, the universe basically gave me something where it said, I'm going to pull you out of your life. I'm going to remove you from your entire safety net. I'm going to pull all your roots up. I'm going to plop you down. And part of it was, now that my husband was in medical school, that he was not there. He was so busy. And so, the universe also said, I'm going to give you all of this time. Like, I'm going to give you so much time on your hands. And it really was just the perfect storm to be able to create something that I didn't even realize I'd been dreaming of creating until that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like the universe aligned to create that for you.
It did.
And I know being in a smaller town when you're just starting out is actually really supportive and helps give that confidence when you're starting out.
Yeah, it was really interesting because the place that I moved to was very different from what I was used to in Minneapolis. So at first when I started teaching, there was not a lot of yoga there. There wasn't any meditation. And I had quite a bit of pushback at first because there was a belief that yoga and meditation was against their religion. And so I had this really interesting kind of issue that popped up that I had never had to deal with before. For those of you who haven't been to Minneapolis, Meredith, I know you have been, but it's very progressive. I know sometimes people think or equate it to kind of like the Portland of like the Midwest. It's just very progressive, and it tends to be pretty liberal. And there's just a lot of interesting things that are going on there. And so I had never been exposed to the idea that there were people out there that thought yoga and meditation was against their religion. And that was my own kind of like being naive and being young and not realizing that there's this big world outside of, the bubble that I live in. And so I went to this place and I started hearing this and I was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand. And it ended up being such a wonderful blessing for two reasons. One, because I had to learn how to shift and morph my teaching in a way to reach people that weren't being served. So these people, they thought that yoga and meditation was against their religion or was against their beliefs, because no one had come and tried to teach them and share with them in a way that made them feel comfortable and that resonated with them. And so I really had to learn how to become a strong teacher and be able to take the same topics and everything that I had been sharing, but then share it with this completely different audience. And it also really opened up my eyes and introduced me to some of the most beautiful people that I've ever met. And they probably weren't people that I would have come across normally in life or my old life, or people that I probably wouldn't have really stepped out to go find because they believed different things than I believed. They did everything differently. And it ended up being such a beautiful blessing because I had to go and I absolutely just fell in love with these people.
Yeah, it took you out of your comfort zone, and that can be so empowering and such an edge for growth.
Yeah, and it also shed a lot of light on those areas that I needed to grow as well.
Yes. I wonder if you can share with us about your journey of finding your voice as a teacher. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, I think as with any journey, it hasn't been linear and it hasn't been easy. But I think that at first when I started teaching, I started to do what I now call being a parrot. So I mimicked my own teachers and I spoke in a way that I was used to being taught. And I think that when you first start teaching, that there really is no way around it. That's just how you start before you build up your comfort and you build up your confidence and you start kind of learning your own words and, figure out the way that you want to describe and teach things. And then once I started to really teach a lot, so not just teaching a class here and teaching a class there, and I found that I was spending a lot of time planning my classes, like more time than I should have been. I was spending hours and hours on what would have been just, a single 60-minute class. And it was because I was trying to create something that was in someone else's voice. So I was trying to create something that sounded like my teachers, or I was trying to create something that sounded like my teaching manuals. And I wanted to create something that sounded like me. And so I did a little bit of soul searching. I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time, but I started to explore, even just during my personal practice, like, how does this feel in my body? How would I describe this feeling in this moment? Like, how would I describe it? Not how do I think I should describe it? And I would just start to kind of explore that language, and I would start to explore, like, how does it feel for me? So maybe my teachers said, warrior 2 should feel this way in your feet. Is that actually how it feels in my feet? Not really. So why am I telling everyone it should feel that way in your feet when it feels different to me? And I just started to explore my personal practice and kind of do that soul searching. And once I realized that I wasn't really speaking in my own voice or speaking my truth, I slowly started to shift it. But it took time because it was very scary. And it's a hard thing. And it makes you very vulnerable, because if I were to stand up in front of a large group of people and share something that weren't my own words, if they didn't like it, then that's okay. Not that big of a deal. It's not my words. But if I come and I open myself up and I share my truth and people don't like it, well, that's terrifying, because I just basically shared my truth and, what I feel like is coming from my deepest self, and you don't like it. And it was very scary. And so what I do now, is I actually have people, like if I am doing a mentorship or I'm working with someone and they're struggling with finding their voice, I usually have them do a little bit of an exercise or like some soul writing. If you're familiar with that, I'm sure in your field you do like a similar practice. But I do soul writing. And so I have people just clear their minds. So take a few deep breaths, kind of connect with that deeper part. I call it the true self. Some people call it the highest self, whatever you call it, connect with that part of you. Because when you're finding your voice, what you're doing is you're building a stronger bridge between that part of you and the part of you that is speaking and sharing. And so for me, at least, my ultimate goal is to always speak from that true part of me and to not let the other layers or let other things kind of get in the way or stop the flow of communication and words from that deepest part of me out to where I'm sharing. So I have people just clear the mind and then take a few deep breaths, connect with that deeper self, and just start writing some notes. So I have them write some notes about what do you stand for? So what is it that you stand for, and what do you want to share? What are you here to share with people? And if you are not doing that when you're speaking or when you're teaching, if you're not sharing that, you're not using your own voice. You're using someone else's. So why are you here? What do you want to share? What feels right to you? And to me, that's a really important part, because when you are speaking from your own voice or your true self, it will always resonate and it will always feel right. It'll feel like that core vibration. And it will feel good. And so thinking about like what feels good and right to me and making note of that. And then also thinking about what's stopping you. So it's great if you figure out, okay, I've built this bridge between me and my true self, but what's stopping me from sharing this? And a lot of times that tells you so much more. So is it that fear of being vulnerable? What if I share something and it's so true to me, but people don't like it? What if I fail? What if no one shows up to listen? What is stopping me from sharing this? And I think that once you really figure out, what is it that I'm here for? Why am I here? Why am I teaching? I mean, we're all here and we choose to be teachers for a reason. So why are you here and why are you teaching? Like, that's your voice. That's what you have to share. But then what's stopping you right now from doing it that way? And so for me, it was a fear of, well, what if I don't do it right? I kind of had this complex for a while where I was like, I'm so young. All of my students are so much older than me. What if they don't take me seriously because I'm the age of their children? And, they're like, well, what does she know about this stuff? She's, I have kids older than her. And that was my own fear. And so I was afraid to really share who I was and speak from my own voice, because what if people didn't accept it? Or what if people didn't take it seriously? And I had to again, just take that fear and I had to release it. And I said, so what? What if people don't take it seriously? I would rather have that than always live a life that didn't feel like it was aligning with what I was here to do and living in a way that felt very shallow and hollow and surface level. And so I started to kind of tap into, what feels good, what feels like it's that right vibration. And after I would say things or share things, if I ever felt like, that just wasn't it. And then I would reflect on that a little bit. Like, why didn't that feel right? Why didn't that sit with me? And then kind of do some reflecting. And it's also just quite a bit of practice too. It's just like with anything. I mean, the more you do it, the easier it comes. So at first, I tried to be very bold and, really speak my truth, but only maybe a couple little things would come out. And then that was about as daring as I could be for that day. And then I'd have to just try it again. And then over time and over the years, it's just become a little bit easier. And I've become more confident and more comfortable stepping into my light and speaking from my true self.
That's really helpful. Thank you. These questions and just, we chose to be teachers for a reason. So connecting with that, giving from the heart. I imagine once you started to tap in to your voice, that there was a response of a resonance with people rather than when you were trying on other people's voices.
Yeah, absolutely. It transformed everything. And it's something that I continue to get compliments on and that people continue to comment on is when they take a class of mine, no matter what the topic is, because I teach all sorts of different things. It doesn't matter if I'm just teaching a mindful folk class or I'm teaching some kind of a teacher training or whatever I'm teaching. People always comment on how they feel. They feel like my teaching is so authentic and that I'm sharing my truth. and that I'm not just there talking. And to me, that's something that's like one of the nicest things that people can say to me, is that is something that resonates with them, and something that when they learn from me and when they come and take a class from me, that they can feel it. And it really transformed everything. And that's when a lot more people started coming to my classes. And that's when more people just started appearing, and more students showed up, and different opportunities appeared. And I think that when you are speaking your truth, and when you're really living and breathing and speaking in a way that is true to you, that's when things start to appear in your life, because everything is just vibrating at the same frequency. And so things just start to appear, and that's when the growth happens.
Yeah. And the doors start opening.
Yeah.
What tips do you have around, let's say our mind kind of gets in the way and it starts being mean or critical of the things we're doing? What advice do you have around the inner critic?
So I think that probably one of the biggest challenges that we have as humans, and I'm going to say especially as women as well, is going to be that inner critic, or sometimes I call it the inner mean girl. And it's probably, I would say, one of the biggest challenges that we face right now. And it's because we just lie to ourselves a lot. We tell ourselves a lot of things that aren't true, or we listen to a lot of noise, and then we convince ourselves that we aren't enough. We aren't, just like you were reading in my bio, there's all these things. And I went through this process. I'm still going through this process of, it's like, we always just think we don't measure up. We think that we're not this enough. We're not, we're not young enough. We're not old enough. We're not smart enough. We're not talented enough. We haven't been doing this long enough. We just aren't enough. And these are all just lies that we're telling ourselves. These aren't true. These are things that, we look around and we compare ourselves to others, and we play, the comparison game. We try to, we have imposter syndrome. We try to make ourselves, look wonderful on social media, or we look at other people's social media and we think, oh, look at that person, look what they're doing. I'm not doing that, so I'm not doing as well. We tell ourselves all of these lies, and we listen to all of this noise. And so we have convinced ourselves that we aren't enough, and that we aren't worthy of love, and that we aren't worthy of all these wonderful things that the world has to offer. And it can be really, really challenging to turn that voice down. Like, I think, at least for me personally, that's probably been one of the most challenging things I have had to do in my life, is learn how to almost give myself permission to step into my light and shine. It's almost like we're always trying to dim ourselves and make ourselves smaller, and, say, oh, don't look at me, don't listen to me, don't mind me over here, and just kind of making ourselves small. But why are we doing that? Like, why are we so afraid to share who we really are? And why do we tell ourselves that we're so insignificant, and that we're less, and that all these people deserve love and happiness and everything, but we don't see it for ourselves. And I think that it's so challenging, and it's also so sad, because that's probably one of the number one things that I see when I work with people. I do a lot of one-on-one, some one-on-one yoga, but a lot of one-on-one meditation work. And I'm sure, Meredith, you see a lot of this as well in your work, as you see people and they come to you, and it's like they see someone completely different than what you see. And you just look at them and you're like, why can't you see what I am seeing? Why can't you see what everyone around you sees? But you have convinced yourself that you are small and unworthy and less than everyone else. And it's just not true. So what I try to do is I try to dive a little bit deeper, because there's a lot of different reasons and there's a lot of things, lies we can tell ourselves. So I try to dive a little bit deeper. I try to, and even personally, if I find that inner critic creeping up, I try to dig a little bit deeper, and I think, why? Like, okay, why is this popping up? Like, I really struggle with, I have a tendency to be a little bit of a workaholic. And as a lot of entrepreneurs are, they're always going, and they're always, the next thing, and saying yes to everything and piling it all on. And so when that voice inside of me starts to say, oh, Kelly, why are you taking a day off? There's all of these things you should be doing. Like, your business won't be thriving. You won't be serving people, all of these things. And so I take a step back. I'm like, okay, why is this voice telling me right now that I shouldn't be resting, that I shouldn't be restoring, that I shouldn't be this and that and that? And I think, and I try to just go a little deeper. And usually that stems from those feelings of, what if I'm not enough, or what if I fail, or what if I can't do it all, right? That fear of not being superwoman and being able to do everything and all the things all the time. And I just try to dive a little bit deeper. Like, what is the problem really? It's not that, I can't take a day off. That's not the problem. I know that I should be taking days off. It's important for me. It's important for my well-being. But why does that part of me then start to say, but don't take a day off, but keep going, but work harder, but push harder, but you can rest later. Right now you need to go, 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 go. And I try to figure out what's actually going on. So once I figured out that kind of that underlying thing, that issue, whatever you want to call it, whatever is really bugging me, I try to then address that. So in the example that I gave of, that fear of, that every entrepreneurial's fear of what if I can't do all the things all the time? And, I usually will work on some kind of, I'll either force myself to rest. So I will go and take a yoga class. I will do a guided meditation. I will go do something that's really nice and lovely and restorative, and I will not feel guilty about it. So I'll go and I'll say, hey, I'm going to go, take this yin class that I love, and I'm going to go do it, and it's going to be awesome, and I deserve it. And I've been working really hard, and I deserve this time off. Or I might, in my meditation practice, I might maybe work with a mantra, something that reminds me that it's okay to rest, and that what I do is enough, that I work hard, and that's good. And sometimes, that rest is just as important as anything else. And I do that with my clients as well. I try to dive a little bit deeper into what exactly, what is that voice really saying? So it might be saying, you're not pretty enough, you're not thin enough, you're not this enough, you don't look a certain way. Okay, what is that voice actually telling you? Yeah, it's telling you those negative, unkind things, but maybe dig a little deeper. Maybe that voice is just kind of telling you that you don't think you're worthy, that you don't think you're enough, that you think that maybe it's, these feelings of, if I look a certain way, more people will like me. Maybe it's, maybe if I look a certain way, I like myself better. And then once you dig a little bit deeper, you can start working with that. So you go, okay, so what it really seems like is we're kind of working with these feelings of, not feeling worthy. And then you can work on that. So you can, you can do that through meditation. You can do it through mantra. You can do it through self-care. You can do something called yoga nidra that I love, where you plant a really powerful intention and you let it grow. You can work on manifesting things into your life, and you just dive a little bit deeper, but always ask those questions. Why is my voice saying this? What's really going on here? And then kind of diving into that. And also just reminding yourself, that's not true. When that voice says you shouldn't be resting, you should be doing everything. Or when that voice says you aren't pretty enough, you aren't thin enough. When that voice says you aren't smart enough, that's not true. That part of you is lying. You can tell that, say, not true. You're a liar. And then you just let it go, because it's not the truth. Just like if it was a real life mean girl, right? They say things that aren't true. They hurt if you let it penetrate and you let it stick, but it's not true. And that's part of the reason why it hurts so badly, because you're like, why are you saying something about me that isn't true? Yeah. It's the same thing to that one that's inside of you. Why are you letting it say things that isn't true? So sometimes you just have to, put it in its place a little bit. Show it who's boss.
Yeah. Yeah. Starting to question the voices and put up some protection with them or talk back.
Yeah. It's okay to be sassy with that inner mean girl. I mean, if you're the kind of person that can be sassy in your regular life to other people, give it to that, liar in your head that's telling you that you're not enough and that you're not good enough and this and that. That's baloney. You can tell it that.
Yes. I wonder if you could also give us a few tips around sleep and meditation and sleeping well and yoga, and just I know this is something that you talk about on your podcast, and I wonder if you can share with us some tips.
Yeah. I took a little bit of a deep dive into sleep, probably like a few months ago. So I've been doing my podcast for about a year, and I noticed a few things. One, I noticed that apparently no one was sleeping because the number one requested topic that I get, well, two really, is anxiety and sleep. So those are the two most requested topics that I get. And then, and so I started creating a lot of sleep meditations, and they would get like 8 times as much traffic as any other topic. And they were still the most requested topic. As always, people are like, I love your sleep meditation. I love it. I need another one. I love that one. I need another one. And so I eventually ended up making an entire album, like an iTunes album of just meditations for sleep. And I became a little bit sleep obsessed because I was like, why is nobody sleeping? Like out of all of the things, and I get requests all the time to have different topics on the podcast covered. And this was one that just came up over and over and over. And so now the running joke, like in my family and also on my team, is that I sleep with a lot of people, and that I go to bed with a lot of strangers. And but there's just so many people that aren't sleeping. And so I became sleep obsessed, and I wanted to figure out why, because I'm very inquisitive. And I personally used to struggle with sleep. So when I owned my studio in Missouri, I overworked myself so much. I used to have these, and this is just like, I can't believe I used to say this to myself. My goal would be to take 2 days off a month. So that was my goal, which means that's what I was shooting for. And I often did not make my goal. And I would leave my house. I'd usually start private clients around 5:30 in the morning. So leave my house around like 5, and I would come home at like 8:30 at night. And I would do that every day. And I would try to take 2 days off a month. And I made myself so sick. I burnt myself out. I was always just giving, and I wanted to serve my students and my clients and the community. And I just gave everything. And then when we moved and I sold the studio and we moved, I was sick for months. It felt like, everything, I could tell my whole body, everything had just been thrown off. And I had given way too much. And it was like my body needed, I felt like 4 months to really like regenerate. But during that time when I was working so hard, I was not sleeping. And that was a big part of the problem. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I would think about all the things that I had to do. I'd wake up in the middle of the night in a panic because I forgot to email so-and-so, this thing, or I couldn't turn my mind off at night. It would just spin. I'd never even fall asleep, or I wasn't sleeping. And then I realized when I started this podcast that apparently no one else is sleeping either. So I became sleep obsessed, and I started to create these guided meditations for sleep. So I found that a lot of people fall asleep when they listen to something. So it's kind of a similar idea as like those people that, maybe listen to a podcast or have white noise, or, need the TV on or something to fall asleep. They need something to listen to. And I started to kind of take all of my tools that I had learned. So yoga nidra and different meditation practices. And I started kind of bringing them all together and creating different sleep meditations. And I started to address kind of the different sleep issues. So there's some for the person who can't fall asleep to begin with, the person who just lays there and their mind is spinning. There's some for the person who wakes up in the middle of the night and can't fall back asleep. There's something for, that person that has nightmares and they wake up and they're just so activated and afraid. How do they calm back down? And so I would say some of the best tips that I can give for people to start sleeping better, because it really can, sleep can transform everything. It just, like, my body runs so much better. Everything, now that I finally have stopped being such a workaholic and I have started taking care of myself and actually sleeping, like, it has transformed everything. And I would say that if you haven't started a regular meditation practice, it really, really can change everything. If you just take 10 minutes before bed, and it doesn't matter what kind of meditation, you can do a guided meditation, you can do any other kind of meditation, but it just helps to take the volume and turn it down before you try to sleep. So if you're always on and you're always activated and you're an entrepreneur, like I know a lot of your listeners are, we're always on and we're spinning and we're just go, 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 go all the time. And so we need to turn that volume down before we can sleep. Also giving yourself permission to sleep. So there was a time where I thought, sleep was kind of weak. That saying where they're like, oh, you can sleep when you're dead. I used to buy into that a little bit. And the ironic thing is that it like nearly almost killed me. But giving yourself permission to sleep and make sleep a priority. So now there's a time where it's like, I have a bedtime and I go to bed by my bedtime. And, if someone wants to schedule something that's past that time, I'm like, I'm sorry, but that's during my sleeping time. And it's just as much a priority as anything else is in my life. And so not only making it a priority, but giving yourself permission to make it a priority. And I know that especially a lot of moms struggle with that because they feel like, I've been serving my kids all day and then they finally go to bed. And so now is the time for me to do something. And so they'll stay up kind of doing different things for them. But still making sleep a priority because it's going to change. It's going to change everything. And then, I don't know. Is that helpful? What other things, what other sleep struggles do you hear about?
Well, I actually had a few ideas come up as you were talking, things I've talked about with clients before. I always like to suggest looking at your caffeine intake because people that might be drinking coffee or tea or whatever into the afternoon, that can really have an effect. Creating bedtime rituals. So like bath before bed or like turning down the computer with the sunset so that you're starting to unwind and having those hours. And then also being really mindful about watching things on a blue screen after the sun goes down. So like 8 or 9 p.m., you put on your favorite Netflix TV show series. And let's say you decide to watch it on your phone and go to bed with it. It's like the blue light can really wake up the pineal gland and make you feel like it's daytime. It just kind of messes up the whole system. So I use Flux on my computer, which turns it golden. And on the new iPhone, there's a setting you can turn, it's called night shift. You could turn the phone golden. So that really helps. But even just like, stepping away from the technology once after a certain time, maybe 7 to 8 p.m., it's like no more of that and start winding down for bed.
Yeah, I love that. That's one, that I often do. Like I personally, I love my bedtime, but I also have a little bit of a bedtime routine. I know that my husband teases me about it a little bit, or we kind of laugh because he knows because I usually in the evenings, I like to just do a little bit of meditation. I like to take a shower and then I like to go into bed and read an actual book, not a Kindle, like a real, book. And he knows that if he comes into the bedroom, I'm laying there, I have my pajamas on, my cream's on and my book's out. It's like, I will be sleeping soon and it is my time. And don't come in my bubble because this is just my time and it's important. And so he always will joke, he'll come in and he'll be like, uh-oh, the creams are on, the book is out, Kelly's going to bed. And it really does, your mind is really powerful. And it also, if you've ever done any research into creating habits, you need some kind of a stimulus or a trigger to basically then start a habit. And so it's just like anything, you make different associations. So your alarm goes off in the morning, you wake up and, whatever the first thing you usually do in the morning, you have a morning routine and it's because, it's triggered by the alarm going off. So you get up, you start making coffee, or you get up, you take a shower, you get up, you let the dog out, whatever it is. So if you start creating a habit around sleep, it really does help. So for me, it's that combination of quiet time, meditation, shower, book, then that tells my mind and my body to start kind of getting into the sleep rhythm. And it really does work. And if I don't do those things, I don't sleep as well, or I have a harder time falling asleep. If I decide, I'm going to take my phone with me into bed and keep watching my Netflix show or whatever, then it really does change that. So I think that's a great point, creating some kind of a routine or even some kind of a trigger or a stimulus that kind of starts your sleep even before you actually close your eyes. Is a really great one. And also just using your resources. So there's a lot of really great resources out there. If you're into aromatherapy or essential oils, you could certainly maybe have a diffuser or something in your bedroom. There's a lot of different blends and things out there that are great. If you like the idea of meditation before bed, you can use guided meditations. If you like yoga before bed, there's some yoga poses, some really great restorative yoga poses. I mean, you can go on YouTube, you could even Google it, like yoga poses for sleep. And there's a lot of really great resources out there. But just thinking about, starting to quiet yourself down even before you shut your eyes. We weren't really designed to be going 100%. It's not like we're built like light switches where it's like you flip us on and we're on, and then you flip us off and we're off. We're like a dimmer switch. So, you need a little bit of time in the morning to kind of get going, a little bit of time at night to kind of dim it back down a little bit. And so creating a routine and a ritual to help induce that sleep.
Yeah, so important. Thank you for all those tips. And people can check out your podcast. What is the podcast called?
It's called Mindful in Minutes.
Great. Yeah. Lots of guided meditations there.
Yes. And then I'll have more people that I can sleep with. That is always, who doesn't love a good joke? My mom actually came up with that joke. She was like, my daughter sleeps with a lot of people. It was great. You got to love those moms.
Yeah, that's really cute. Well, I think just like one or two more questions for you, but I'm curious, the shift you made when you were teaching students into teaching teachers.
Yeah.
And this is something I'm considering stepping into this next year. And I just wonder if you have any tips or personal shares around that shift and what that was like for you.
So I feel like the whole theme of this episode is going to be, I was afraid of a lot of things, but another thing I was afraid of was teaching teachers. And people kept telling me, I want to learn how to teach yoga. Like, will you teach me? And I kept being like, no, but I know of some great programs, like in this location or that location, like I'll help you find one. They're like, no, I don't want those. I want to learn from you. Like I want to be a teacher like your teacher. I don't want to be a teacher like their teacher. And I came up with all these reasons why I shouldn't do it and this and that. And then finally, one of my students, who is now a dear friend of mine, gave me one of those kind of real, tough love moments and was like, Kelly, there are all these people that want to learn from you. And you are denying them the opportunity to learn because you are afraid. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And I was like, you're right. And she said, there are all these people that want to do this. And you just need to stop being so afraid. And this is something that you can do. Everyone knows it except for you. And so I had the luxury of having, you always know it's a real friend when they'll tell you something like that. But I had the luxury of someone who reminded me of the fact that I was, again, getting in my own way. And I knew that there were people that wanted to learn from me. And I knew that I had something that was worth sharing. But I wasn't... I was afraid and also apprehensive because it was a lot of work. So even as that's something that if you start to shift into, there is a lot of work that goes into it. So there's a lot of work and thought that goes into even what will I teach? What will the curriculum look like? What kind of modality do I want to teach with? Is it online? Is it on person? I mean, there's all these things that go into basically teaching teachers. And there are a lot more hoops to jump through. But it's by far now probably one of the favorite things that I do. And it's so wonderful because I feel like I am giving people like me the tools to go and live their dream. And I just really enjoy connecting with people personally. And I really, really enjoy just the act of teaching. And my whole life, I've kind of been a teacher in some way or another. And this is the kind of teaching that I feel like really resonates with me. And I also enjoy the aspect of being able to build people up. And so a lot of times when people come to me to take some kind of a training, they're still like, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe I just want to learn more about it, but I don't know if I'll ever be a teacher. And, sometimes they just need that person that's like, nope, you can do this. Here's the tools, go and do it. Don't be afraid, and kind of, push the birdie out of the nest. And I really like being able to do that. But I will, so for you personally thinking about doing this, or anyone who's listening thinking about doing that, it is a lot of work, more work than anything else that I have done. And it can be very scary, and it can also be very bumpy. So it can take a while to kind of work the kinks out of, whether it's an online course or, when I do a yoga teacher training, that's 200 hours of, coursework that I had to create. Even like I do meditation teacher trainings, yoga nidra teacher trainings, like over a very full weekend, so about 25 hours. And you kind of think when you're starting, you're like, oh, I could talk for a whole weekend. I could create, and then you go and you create it, and you're just like, but how am I going to create this full thing? And there's just so much responsibility in, having people coming and learning from you and giving them what they deserve, and giving them, what you want to share. So it's definitely challenging and a lot of work, but it's worth it. And it just, you have to be in it for the long haul, and you have to be able to look at your stuff objectively. And so maybe you run through your course the first time and you realize, this part, I really didn't explain this well. Or you're like, this part, it's not that relevant. Or you think, wow, I really should have included this. And you have to be able to look at what you're creating objectively, especially when you're, when people are trusting you to give them the tools that they need to then go be a successful teacher. And you need to be able to edit where you need to, and refine and add and change. And, it can be a very humbling experience as well, but it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know. Did I help or did I scare you away from
it? No, thank you for sharing your journey. It sounds really fulfilling.
It is. And I think it's absolutely worth it. And if it's something that you're considering doing, even if you just start small scale, so even doing something like mentorships and things like that, where you kind of step into the teaching role, but almost in a more traditional teacher role, where you may have more almost like coursework or things like that. And so maybe starting a little smaller, doing mentorships, or even, several to one kind of like courses before you step into like the big kind of like teacher training type things. Mm-hmm. And it can help you work out some of the kinks before you go and do the big programs.
Cool. Thank you for this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So where can people find your work and stay connected with you, and what's coming up in your business? What are you feeling excited about?
Well, people can connect with me. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm chatty. So, I am on Instagram. So it's at Yoga for You Online. I respond to all DMs. I really like connecting with people. So anyone who sends me, a DM, I always respond and usually end up chatting for a while. Or you can send me an email. All of that's on my website, yogaforyouonline.com. What I'm most looking forward to, or what's coming up. I am really excited. So in 2019, I have quite a few teacher trainings coming up. So meditation teacher trainings, yoga nidra teacher trainings, and there's a few others that are coming up, a few more dates that are coming up that haven't been announced, but that are coming. So from the teachers side of it, I'm really excited about those trainings. So the meditation teacher training and yoga nidra teacher training are my two newest trainings. And so I've been doing them, and so we're really kind of going full steam ahead in 2019 with a lot more of those trainings. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then from the student side, I have 2 retreats coming up. So I have a retreat over New Year's Eve for people who want a little less bubbly and a little more bliss on their New Year's Eve. And then I have my next international retreat is going to be in Peru this summer. So that's what I'm looking forward to for the students, and then trainings for the teachers.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any closing words for us before I end this with a short prayer?
Yes, I have 2 things. Because like I said, I'm chatty. So my first one is, and this is something that I just today, I was reflecting a lot on how we tend to attach our self-worth with our appearance. Actually, after I'm done with you, I'm headed over for a photo shoot. So before I hopped on with you, I was, doing all of the pre-photo shoot things with the hair and the whatever. And so I went on a little bit of a mini little yogi Instagram rant, just a little bit of one about how when I was young and I used to think, I used to look at whatever, these magazines and think like, why don't I look like that? I'm not enough because I don't look like that. Or those women just must wake up looking like that, when it's like, no, they actually, have this giant team of people. So closing words is something I'm thinking about today is that there's nothing more beautiful than a woman who is unapologetically herself. So I think that is that when you're living from that true self, that is the absolute most beautiful thing about you. And that, a picture only shows your shell. It only shows your exterior, but your words and your actions show your soul. And that's something that Photoshop can't change. And it's something that's so beautiful about you. And also, I guess, just reflecting on what we've been talking about is, don't let fear get in your way, and that you are enough, and what you do is enough, who you are is enough, and everything that you have and everything that you are is enough. So my yogi rants.
Yeah, let's just close our eyes for a moment and let that simmer and breathe it in and allow it to permeate, feeling this feeling of enough, knowing that we are enough. Taking any gems from this episode today, any words of wisdom that you wish to take with you on your path, feeling that in your heart space. And I bring my hands to my heart and bow with gratitude to Kelly for sharing her wisdom with us today, and to all of you listening for being on your path and showing up and being willing to learn and broaden your horizons. Just honoring all of you listening, honoring you, Kelly. Thank you for sharing with us. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.